I'm advancing the tube now.
Steady, heart rate is increasing.
Watch the saturation.
You know, there's a specific kind of silence that settles over a hospital corridor at 3 in the morning. It's not peaceful, it's expectant. Like the building itself is holding its breath, waiting for the next siren to shatter the quiet. And that was the world Elias Thorne lived in. Elias was the guy you walked past 1,000 times without seeing. The guy in the faded gray scrubs pushing a mop bucket with a squeaky wheel. The guy who knew which vending machine gave free coffee if you kicked it in the right spot, and which doctors were sleeping in the on-call rooms when they were supposed to be rounding. To the staff at St. Jude's Medical Center in Chicago, Elias was just environmental services, a faceless silhouette cleaning up the messes that life and death left behind. But what they didn't know, what nobody bothered to ask, was that behind those tired hazel eyes and the calloused hands that smelled perpetually of bleach, lay a mind that used to stitch soldiers back together in the dusty heat of Kandahar. See, Elias wasn't always pushing a mop. 10 years ago he was Sergeant Thorne, a combat medic with a reputation for having ice water in his veins when the shrapnel started flying. But life has a funny way of stripping you down, doesn't it? After the discharge, after his wife Sarah got sick with a cancer that ate through their savings faster than the chemo, ate through her cells, and after the mountain of debt buried his dreams of medical school, Elias did what he had to do to keep a roof over his 8-year-old daughter's head. He took the night shift, the invisible shift, swallowing his pride every single night as he buffed the floors of a world he was once destined to lead, watching residents half his age make mistakes he would have caught in his sleep. On this particular Tuesday, the wind was howling off Lake Michigan, rattling the glass of their doors, and Elias was working on a stubborn scuff mark near Trauma Room 1, his back aching with that familiar dull throb, when the radio at the nurse's station crackled to life, announcing an incoming Priority 1, 12-year-old female, respiratory distress, possible anaphylaxis, ETA 2 minutes. The energy in the air shifted instantly. You could feel the electricity spike, nurses dropping their charts, residents stiffening up. But when the ambulance bay doors hissed open and the stretcher came flying in, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees because running alongside that gurney, looking pale as a ghost and terrified beyond belief, was Dr. Evelyn Sterling. Now, you have to understand who Evelyn Sterling was. She wasn't just a doctor. She was the doctor, the chief of medicine, the ice queen of St. Jude's, a woman who could fire a board member without blinking and perform a thoracotomy in heels. She was brilliant, intimidating, and completely untouchable. But right now, clutching the hand of that girl on the stretcher, she wasn't a CEO. She was just a mom watching her world crumble. The girl on the stretcher was Maya, her daughter, and Maya looked bad, really bad. Her skin had this waxen, grayish pallor, her lips were ting blue, and she was gasping for air like a fish on a dock, her chest heaving with a terrifying, rhythmic struggle. Get her on the monitor. One want a large bore 4, now. Evelyn was barking orders, her voice cracking, violating every protocol about treating family members. But nobody dared stop her. The trauma team swarmed the bed, led by Dr. Vance, the attending on duty, a guy who had more hair gel than bedside manner and an ego that could barely fit through the door. Dr. Sterling, please, step back, let us work, Vance said. His tone clipped, trying to assert dominance in his owner. It looks like anaphylaxis. She's swollen, BP is tanking, get the epi. Prepare for intubation. Elias had stopped mopping. He pressed himself against the wall to stay out of the way, trying to disappear like he always did. But his eyes were locked on the girl, and his medic brain, the one he thought he'd turned off years ago, kicked into overdrive. He watched the way Maya's chest moved. He saw the peculiar swelling around her face. Not the hives you'd expect with an allergy, but a fluid retention that looked different. And then he saw it, a detail so small that only someone looking for it would notice. Dark patches on the inside of her gums as she gasped, and a bronze darkening on her elbows that didn't match the rest of her pale skin. Epinephrine is drawn up, a nurse shouted. Uncapping the needle, Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach, his heart hammering against his ribs, because he knew with the certainty of a man who had seen this exact presentation in a dehydrated soldier. 3 days into a desert patrol. That if they pushed that epi, if they treated this as an allergic reaction and flooded her system with adrenaline, without supporting her cortisol, they were going to kill her. It wasn't anaphylaxis. It was an adrenal crisis, an Addisonian crash. Her body had stopped producing the hormones needed to keep her heart beating under stress, and the standard protocol was about to become a death sentence. He gripped the handle of his mop so hard his knuckles turned white. A war waging inside him, the janitor who needed this job versus the medic who took an oath. And he looked at Vance, who was holding the syringe like a weapon. And he looked at Evelyn, who was sobbing into her hands, completely falling apart. Elias took a step forward, his work boots squeaking on the linoleum, a sound that cut through the chaos like a gunshot. "Don't give her the epi," Elias said. His voice raspy, but loud. The room froze. I mean absolute silence. Like someone hit the mute button on the world. Every head turned to look at the guy in the gray scrubs holding a mop bucket. Dr. Vance looked at him with a mixture of confusion and absolute disgust, like a talking dog had just walked in. "Excuse me." Vance sneered. "Security, get the janitor out of here." I said, "Don't give it." Elias stepped closer, ignoring the security guard starting to move toward him, his eyes locked on Evelyn. "Look at her gums, look at her elbows, she's hyperpigmented. Look at the hypotension. It's not an allergy, Dr. Sterling. Look at her. It's Addison's, she's an adrenal failure. If you hit her with epi without hydrocortisone, you're going to stop her heart. You're out of your mind," Vance shouted, his face turning red. "You're a janitor. Get out." "Nurse, push the meds." "No." Elias dropped the mop, the clatter echoing off the walls. And he moved with a speed that startled everyone, stepping between the nurse and the patient. Not threatening, just blocking, a human shield. "Dr. Sterling, please. Has she been craving salt? Has she been tired, losing weight? Think, don't let them kill her." Evelyn looked up, her eyes wild, tear-streaked. And for a second she looked at Elias, really looked at him, and she didn't see the uniform. She saw the desperation, the absolute conviction in his posture. The way he stood like a soldier holding a line. The questions hit her like physical blows. The salt cravings. Yes, Maya put salt on everything. The exhaustion she blamed on schoolwork. The weight loss she thought was just a growth spurt. "Wait," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. "Wait, stop, Elena. This man is delusional," Vance snapped, looking ready to tackle Elias himself. "We are losing valuable time." I said wait. Evelyn roared, the CEO snapping back into place. She rushed to the bedside, prying open Maya's mouth, shining her penlight. And there it was, the dark, bluish-black pigmentation along the gum line, a classic, textbook sign of Addison's disease that they had all missed because they were looking for horses instead of zebras. Evelyn looked at Vance, her face pale. "Check her sodium and potassium, now, but do it." Vance motioned to the nurse, fuming, and they ran a rapid blood gas, the machine spitting out the results in seconds. "Sodium is critical low, potassium is sky high," the nurse read out, her voice shaking. It's adrenal insufficiency." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The realization that they had been seconds away from a fatal mistake hanging in the air. "Get me 100 milligrams of hydrocortisone for push, stat," Evelyn ordered, her voice regaining its steel, though her hands were shaking violently. "And start saline." Wide open, they pushed the steroids, and it was like watching a miracle in real time. Within minutes, the blue tint faded from Maya's lips. Her breathing slowed, the terrifying gasps settling into a rhythm, her blood pressure climbing out of the basement. The crisis broke. She was going to live. Elias, seeing the numbers stabilize on the monitor, felt the adrenaline crash, his knees going weak. He realized he was standing in the middle of the trauma room, surrounded by staring doctors, having just disobeyed a direct order and physically intervened in a code. He looked at Vance, who was staring at the floor, humiliated, and then at Evelyn, who was weeping softly, holding her daughter's hand. He knew the drill. He picked up his mop bucket, the squeak of the wheel the only sound as he backed out of the room, disappearing back into the hallway, back into the shadows where he belonged. But things don't just go back to normal after a bomb goes off, do they? The next morning, The hospital gossip mill was running hotter than a fusion reactor. Everyone was whispering about the magic janitor, the guy who outsmarted the chief of medicine and the attending. But Elias just kept his head down, cleaning the cafeteria floors, waiting for the inevitable summons from HR to fire him for insubordination. He needed this job. He needed the insurance for his own daughter, Chloe, and the thought of losing it made his stomach churn with acid. He was in the locker room, changing out of his scrubs at the end of his shift, when the door opened and Dr. Vance walked in, looking like he'd chewed on a lemon. "Thorne," Vance said, not making eye contact, "Dr. Sterling wants to see you in her office." "Top floor. Am I fired?" Elias asked, buttoning his flannel shirt. His hands steadied despite his nerves. "That's above my pay grade," Vance muttered. "Just go." Elias took the elevator up, the ride feeling like it took 100 years. Watching the numbers climb floor 10, floor 15, floor 20 up to the executive suite where the air smelled like expensive lilies and money. The assistant waved him in, and there she was, Evelyn Sterling, sitting behind a desk that cost more than Elias's car, looking exhausted but composed, the armor back in place. "Mr. Thorne," she said, standing up. "Please sit." Elias remained standing, holding his faded baseball cap in his hands. "If it's all right with you, ma'am, I'd rather stand. I know I crossed a line last night. I touched a patient. I interfered with a physician. I accept the termination. I just ask that you don't fight my unemployment claim. I have a little girl at home." Evelyn stared at him, and then she did something he didn't expect. She laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. "Termination? Mr. Thorne, you saved my daughter's life. If Dr. Vance had his way, I'd be planning a funeral this morning instead of a discharge." She walked around the desk, leaning against it, crossing her arms. "I pulled your file, Elias, or should I say, Sergeant Thorne. Distinguished Service Cross, Bronze Star, top of your class in combat medic training. You were 3 credits shy of a PA degree when you dropped off the map 5 years ago. What happened?" Elias looked at the carpet, the shame of his fall burning his neck. "Life happened, Dr. Sterling. My wife got sick. Ovarian cancer. Stage 4 by the time we caught it. The insurance denied the experimental trials. I spent everything I had, sold the house, the car, cashed out the 401k. I couldn't study and take care of her and work 3 jobs. So I stopped. And when she passed, well, the debt didn't die with her. I needed steady work. I needed to be a dad." Evelyn's face softened, the ice melting away completely. "You're a waste of talent, Elias. You're mopping floors when you have a diagnostic mind that puts half my staff to shame. With all due respect, ma'am, that mop pays for my daughter's braces. It puts food on the table. There's no shame in honest work." "No," she agreed quietly. "There isn't. But there is shame in a system that lets a man like you slip through the cracks." She picked up a folder from her desk and held it out to him. "I don't want to fire you, Elias. I want to hire you." Elias hesitated, looking at the folder. "Hire me? To do what?" "I'm not certified anymore. To lead a new diagnostic oversight team," Evelyn said, her eyes blazing with a new intensity. "We missed Addison's because we were arrogant, because we rely on algorithms instead of observation. I want you to build a program that trains our residents to see what you saw, to look at the patient, not the monitor. We'll pay for your recertification, your PA school, everything. Full salary, benefits, and a schedule that lets you see your daughter." Elias felt the room spin slightly, a lifeline being thrown to a drowning man. "Why?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why would you do that for a janitor?" "Because," Evelyn said, stepping close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes. "Because last night, when everyone else saw a chart, you saw my daughter. And I need more people like that in my hospital." You'd think the story ends there, with a handshake and a swelling orchestral score. But reality is a lot grittier than a movie script. And the transition from janitor to colleague was about as smooth as a gravel road. Elias accepted the offer, not for himself, but for Chloe, because he wanted her to look at her dad and see more than just a tired man in a gray uniform. But walking into that hospital the next Monday, wearing a button-down shirt and a lanyard that said special consultant, felt like walking behind enemy lines. The nurses who used to ignore him now whispered as he passed, The doctors who had dismissed him looked at him with a mix of jealousy and skepticism, especially Dr. Vance, who made it his personal mission to remind everyone that Elias didn't even have a degree yet. The first few months were brutal. Elias was balancing his new role, attending night classes for his physician assistant certification, and trying to raise a 10-year-old girl who was starting to ask why Daddy was always studying. There were nights he wanted to quit, nights he sat in his beat-up Honda Civic in the parking garage, staring at the steering wheel, wondering if he was deluding himself, wondering if a guy who cleaned toilets really belonged at the table with Ivy League graduates. One rainy afternoon, about 3 months in, Evelyn showed up at his apartment. She'd never been there before, and seeing her sleek black Mercedes parked in front of his crumbling brick walk-up was a culture clash that made Elias wince. He opened the door, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, holding a spatula, the smell of burnt grilled cheese hanging in the air. "Dr. Sterling," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, I wasn't expecting you. Did I miss a meeting?" "No," she said, standing in the hallway, looking uncharacteristically nervous, holding a Tupperware container. "I brought lasagna. Homemade. Well, my housekeeper's homemade, but I heated it up." She peeked inside. "Can I come in?" Elias stepped back, letting her into his small world, the mismatched furniture he'd salvaged from Goodwill, the walls covered in Chloe's drawings, the stack of medical textbooks on the dining table next to a pile of overdue bills. It was warm, cluttered, and lived in, the complete opposite of her sterile, penthouse life. Evelyn looked around, her eyes landing on a framed photo of Elias's late wife, Sarah, smiling on a beach. She was beautiful, Evelyn said softly. She was everything, Elias replied, the grief still a dull ache in his chest. "Look, Evelyn, Dr. Sterling, why are you here?" She turned to him, and the vulnerability on her face was startling. "Maya had a checkup today. Her cortisol levels are stable. She's back to playing soccer. She asked about you. She calls you the soldier who saved me, and I realized, Elias, that I never really thanked you. Not as a CEO, but as a mother. I was so busy trying to fix your career that I forgot to just be a human being." She sat down on his lumpy sofa, and for the next hour, they didn't talk about medicine or protocols or budgets. They talked about their kids, about the terror of single parenthood, about the loneliness that comes when the house is quiet at night. Evelyn admitted that her perfect life was a facade, that her husband had left her because she was married to the hospital, and that she felt like she was failing Maya every single day. Elias listened, pouring her a glass of cheap wine, and for the first time, the class divide between them evaporated, leaving just two people trying to keep their heads above water. But the real test came 6 months later, during a massive snowstorm that shut down Chicago. The roads were ice, the power grid was flickering, and St. Jude's was operating on backup generators. A multi-car pileup on the I-90 flooded the air with trauma cases, pushing the staff to the breaking point. Elias was in the command center with Evelyn, coordinating triage, when a call came in: a bus rollover, mass casualties, mostly kids on a ski trip. The air became a war zone, gurneys wall to wall, screaming. Chaos. Dr. Vance was overwhelmed, freezing up as the cases poured in, trying to manage a critical airway on a teenager while 3 other patients were crashing. Elias saw it happening, saw the panic in Vance's eyes, the way the system was buckling. "I'm going down there," Elias said, grabbing a trauma gown. "You're not licensed yet, Elias." Evelyn shouted over the noise, "Liability. To hell with liability." Elias snapped, his old command voice returning. "That's a mass cal event, and your lead attending is drowning. I'm not going to act as a doctor. I'm going to act as a medic. I'm going to organize the chaos. Trust me." Evelyn looked at him, seeing the soldier again. "Go." Elias hit the floor like a thunderbolt. He didn't try to do surgery. He did what medics do best: triage. He moved from bed to bed, calm, efficient, barking orders that cut through the panic. "You, pressure on that wound. Nurse, start 2 lines here. Then move to bed 4. This one is stable. Move him to the hallway. Clear the trauma bay. Vance, stop shaking and intubate that kid. You've done it 1,000 times. Look at me, look at me. Do it." His presence was a stabilizer, a grounding rod for the electrical storm of the air. He worked for 12 hours straight, stitching minor wounds, splinting fractures, holding the hands of terrified kids, and organizing the flow so the doctors could do their jobs. When the sun finally came up over the frozen city, the air was quiet, the patients were stabilized, and the floor was covered in bloody gauze and muddy footprints. Elias was sitting on a gurney in the hallway, exhausted, his scrubs stained, drinking a lukewarm coffee when Dr. Vance walked up to him. The arrogant doctor looked humbled, dark circles under his eyes. He stood there for a long moment, struggling with his pride. "I lost the airway," Vance said quietly. "I'm the teenager. I panicked. You stepped in and repositioned the head. You saved him. We saved him," Elias said. Not looking up, Vance nodded slowly. "You know, for a janitor, you're a hell of a doctor, Thorne." He extended his hand. It was the first time in 3 years he had offered Elias anything other than an insult. Elias shook it. 2 years later, the auditorium at St. Jude's was packed, standing room only. It was the graduation ceremony for the new class of residents and physician assistants. Evelyn Sterling stood at the podium, looking radiant, smiling down at the front row. "Today isn't just about handing out diplomas," she said into the microphone. "It's about recognizing that medicine isn't about the white coat. It's about the eyes, the ears, and the heart. 3 years ago, we implemented a new system here, the Thorne Protocol. It encourages every member of our staff, from the surgeons to the environmental services team, to speak up if they see something wrong. It has saved an estimated 40 lives in this hospital alone." She paused, her voice thickening with emotion. "And it is named after a man who taught me that the most valuable credentials aren't the ones on the wall, but the ones you carry in your soul. Please welcome our new Chief of Emergency Medicine Operations, Elias Thorne." Elias walked across the stage, wearing his crisp white coat. His daughter Chloe, now a teenager, cheering wildly from the audience, sitting right next to Maya Sterling. He shook Evelyn's hand, and then, in a breach of protocol that made the crowd roar, she pulled him into a hug. "You made it," she whispered in his ear. "We made it," he whispered back. Later that evening, at a quiet dinner in a small Italian place, Elias, Evelyn, Maya, and Chloe were sitting around a table, laughing, sharing pizza. It wasn't a formal date, but it was something, a family maybe, a patchwork family stitched together from broken pieces. Elias looked at Evelyn across the candlelight, looked at the way she smiled at his daughter, and he thought about the mop bucket. He thought about the squeaky wheel. He thought about the invisibility. And he realized that being unseen had given him a superpower. It taught him how to look. "You okay?" Evelyn asked, touching his hand. "Yeah," Elias smiled, squeezing her fingers. "I was just thinking. I missed a spot on the floor in the lobby. It's gonna bother me all night." Evelyn laughed, that rich, genuine laugh he loved. "Don't worry," she said. "I know a guy. He's pretty good with a mop. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The question that lingers after the happy ending fades. We love stories like this, right? The underdog hero, the hidden genius. But for every Elias Thorne who gets discovered, how many are still out there? How many brilliant minds are emptying trash cans or driving Ubers or scanning groceries? Because life dealt them a bad hand and the system refused to give them a second deal? How many cures for cancer? How many symphonies? How many inventions are trapped inside people we walk past every single day, without even making eye contact? It makes you wonder, doesn't it? The next time you see someone in a uniform, someone cleaning up a mess, ask yourself, do I really see them? Or am I just seeing the function they perform? Because you never know. The person holding the mop might be the only one who knows how to save your life. What do you think? Does our society put too much value on the piece of paper and not enough on the person? Or are credentials the only safety net we have? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And hey, be kind to each other out there. You never know who you're talking to. Peace.